Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda, Cities ABC, Open Business Council YouTube podcast series. We are here once again to continue profiling global thought leaders and influencers and business leaders that are shifting the way the world operates and creating new narratives, creating new solutions, and as well using the tools of our time, technology, social media, and a lot of other things to empower, first of all, organizations, but as well societies and cities and the world. We've been doing this for 1 year now, and I've been learning and had the privilege to talk with some of the leading personalities in the world. It's astonishing for me is the creativity of people, the way of looking out of the box, and especially the persistence and resilience of most of the people we've been profiling, and as well showing as well that there's much more positive stories and much more stories of open inspiration than sometimes the media that we have around us make us understand. So today we're going to be profiling precisely someone that I've actually been following for some time, that I respect a lot, and we're going to continue on this series of looking at different personalities from the world. So I welcome to our series Alvin Foo. And Alvin is kind of someone difficult to put in one box because he does a lot of things. Initially from Malaysia, he's been a citizen of the world, but working in Shanghai, where he's based right now, and as well with companies in Singapore, and as well a global footprint in digital. So Alvin Foo is a global thought leader, serial entrepreneur, and influencer. One of the top leading digital influencers in technology and in a lot of areas, especially related to blockchain and business. He has a huge digital presence that comprehends both in English speaking and Chinese world as well, which is not an easy task. And has been as well making a lot of bridge of trends coming from, of course, the world, but as well to China and vice versa, which I think it's really important because there's a lot of mystification around China and the innovation and the boom of technology and the radical transformation that China saw in the last 20 years. So Alvin brings more than 25 years of experience in the Asia-Pacific region, but as well with the global footprint that comprehends working and collaborating with in senior leadership roles in the likes of Google, Nokia, Omnicom, and Interpublic Group. He is as well the co-founder of DAO Ventures and the senior internet and mobile media executive that has been, so for instance, in one of these leading positions was the head of mobile for Google China, which is in itself a massive position. And during the last 20-something years that he's been in China, he saw all the transformation. And he's actually been riding the wave as well from Shanghai, which is one of the capitals of that. And as well, he worked as well with a lot of companies in the Fast 500 companies in APAC, and as well has been listed, especially by Deloitte. Tokmatsu, one of his startups, especially has been listed as one of the leading companies on this. In terms of the companies that is behind, there's quite a lot of cutting edge technology and solutions. I mentioned DAO Ventures, that is building decentralized finance pooled manager of blockchain, which is quite an interesting thing, and you're going to be talking about this. And then is as well behind NASDAQ's a tokenized stock trading exchange that is a bridge, like something like between NASDAQ and blockchain. And is as well member of the SXSW of the Board of Advisors. So of course, one of the biggest organizations related with media and cutting edge different things. That is probably the biggest event on technology in the world, one of them. And as well as being involved and mentor of Spark Labs, a global accelerator that has been as well involved. And there's much more things. He's part as well of the China Accelerator that he was involved. So his profile is really very impressive, and it's a privilege to have you here, Alvin. I'm looking forward for this interview.
The privilege is all mine. Thank you very much, Dinis, for making this possible. Especially, I thank you for the lavish introduction. Well, 25 years or slightly more. It feels like everything just started yesterday. I mean, really. It felt that I just graduated from college. I was just talking to my friend. It felt like just yesterday that I graduated, and now I'm almost at the tail end of my career. I'm not saying that I'm going into retirement, but the fact is that time flies, and without you realizing, 25 years just passed. And well, it's been very exciting, especially seeing the phenomenal growth in China, and also being part of this group of people that I've been associating and also working with for the last 35 years. It's been exciting in terms of learning, exciting in terms of growing, and I think more importantly, right, I think is the notion of growing together with them and seeing what's the big thing, what's going to be the grander thing in the next couple of years from now.
Well, you've been always ahead of the game, to say less. I think you've been ahead of the game in digital, ahead of the game in technology, and even what I love is your vitality and the persistence. So I would like to touch a bit of your background, because you have quite a unique background. So from Malaysia to China, and I know that Malaysia, for most of people that don't know and listening to us, has a huge Chinese community. Actually, it's quite a multi-ethnical country, but it's as well a unique country in its own. But especially when you move to China, of course, China is not what it is now. So I would like to hear about that background from Malaysia, your education. You have as well Brunel education. So a bit of how the Alvin Foo that is now today, how that happened, a bit of your background and history.
I think Malaysia for me was really a so-called, very much foundation years. I actually started off building companies in Malaysia when I was still back home, and it was my childhood dream that I want to be in business. But I came from a legal background, so technology was like the other side of the equation. Never thought I could have never imagined that graduating with a law degree and subsequently embarking onto internet or onto digital transformation and what's happening right now. And all this because it started in 1995. I always go back to that one story. I read a book, right? There are two things that changed my life. One is that I read a book by Bill Gates. If you can recall, there was a book called The Road Ahead by Bill Gates. Talks about the future, and one of which is the internet, broadband, and so forth. So that was one, yeah. And followed by that, right? I actually accessed the internet. So meaning I actually started, subscribing to an internet account in 1995, where that was really early stage, where I think Netscape wasn't even there yet. We were using a Mosaic browser at the time, and that was just slightly before Netscape came about. So that was my entry to the internet world with a 9.6K modem. Very slow, right? But it was my first view of potentially what the internet's going to be in the future. And that was my starting point when I decided that I have to get into the internet business. So Malaysia was really a foundation year, and subsequently in 1997 I started a company called Via Communication Network that looks into the internet business. So that was a year that I actually kickstarted. So going from advertising, going from legal, I've gone into the internet business in 1997. So 24 years, almost 24 years in the tech business. But 1997 was a year that I actually, set foot and started my journey. That actually started in 1995, where I read the book, and obviously everything becomes history, because from 97 to 2006 in Malaysia, I actually grew the company from a very small company to a very sizable company before I exited to China. And China, I landed in China sometime in 2006. It was an opportunity to come to China to do business, but the reality was coming from Malaysia, a very small country, as I'm sure we talked about this. Malaysia is a very small country by comparison. The population of the entire Malaysia is actually the same size as the population of Shanghai. So that's the scale we are talking about. But because I've never been to China, except when I came here traveling to China when I was a kid. So the China then in the 80s was a very different China compared to what it is right now. So coming then in 2006, even then at scale, it was a very sizable scale that I ended up, instead of doing business, is to learn about business first. And I had the opportunity of working with a startup in China that gradually moved into, the first area was actually the mobile business. So my first set foot in China was to learn about the mobility business in China. And it was a really early stage, because at that time, mobile business was really Nokia. At that time, there was no smartphone. The smartphone of 2006 was a Nokia N95, right? those were the days where the browser was like this small, right? And the surfing on the mobile internet was like 2.5G at best, and was really literally very, very slow until 2007, where iPhone came about, and then obviously Android came, and then the whole ecosystem become more and more mature. The infrastructure is there, and then the entire mobile reaches an inflection point where it took off. And it actually took off when I actually joined Google in 2011. So 2011 was a year where the entire mobile industry took off in China in a big way. And that's also because the readiness of the infrastructure, the devices, and followed by Google, who actually gone very big in that space. And that point, from that onwards, right, mobile just became a very huge business. And for the last 15 years, right, prior to starting DAO Ventures and also NASDAQ, my entire life in China, the 15 years, right, was to focus on the mobile advertising business. So from a tech perspective, and how did all this digital transformation, idea consultation came about is because now my job evolved around advising a lot of my clients, right? And a lot of my clients are companies, are big companies, are Fortune 500 companies, local companies that cares about what the future looks like and how are they and how to get themselves ready for the future. So as a result, my jobs from Google to Omnicom to Interpublic evolve around guiding them, getting at least providing consultancy and also assistance in a way to really handhold them, talk to them about the digital world, in the next couple of years, and to be ready, all right? And then you need to be transformed. Then you need to be digital transformed and be ready for the future. And that was the main reason why my team and so that our team and myself, right, got into very deep into understanding all the various technology that impacts business. So when I look at the world, right, I always look at the trend, because the trend will impact all these businesses eventually, right? Anything that started out as a trend, a blockchain being one example, eventually at some point is going to have a huge impact. Maybe right now, small impact, but at some point when inflection comes, right, is going to be very impactful to all in the industries. And I'm sure we're seeing a lot of this technology now becoming. Now we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about big data. These topics were something that we talked about 10 years ago, right? But now everything is big data, everything is machine learning, everything now is artificial intelligence. And moving forward, right, artificial intelligence is going to be adopted right into various new things that we talk about, smart cities, right? We talk about autonomous cars. And these trends that start like very small trends, eventually are going to be adopted, right? And become not just business, but trends that's going to impact business in a big way. And that's the reason why the last 10 years has been a lot of work in terms of consulting and providing a lot of advice to our client in terms of how to optimize and also accelerate digital transformation.
I want to touch specific in the context of migrating from Malaysia, which was at the time fast growing and was one of the tigers of Asia. And it's still, to be honest, you said that it's a small country, but compared with a lot of countries in Europe, it's not so small, with 40 million plus population, and is still quite a strong economy. Of course, China is China. But how was it from moving from Malaysia to China? Because at the time, China was not still the powerhouse that it is now. So you went through all the explosion of China. I would like to touch that because you were part of that. So you more than anyone else. But what I love about you is that you always kept a very strong footprint in China, but as well worldwide. And most of normally in the last, especially 5 years, there's been kind of a wall that has been much bigger, which I think it's a stupid wall, but because you should be always doing what you do in bridges. It's more important than walls. But I would like to hear a bit about your background from moving there. How do you saw initially China becoming the powerhouse that it is now, the world leading economy and the world leading technology powerhouse, and in a lot of ways 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. You mentioned smart cities. It's already 10 years ahead of the rest of the world in terms of smart cities, in blockchain as well. The entire government put a blockchain strategy. In other countries, They're still discussing it. There's a digital currency in China. So I would like to hear about that experience. But you always kept a relationship with the likes of SXCX, which is kind of the biggest leading trends as well in the world, and the US based. And you studied in Bruno also. A bit of that background for people listening to us? Because I think everyone thinking about China thinks right now China is this global powerhouse, but 20 years ago it was a very emergent economy with a lot of challenges.
Now, if I were to look back in Shanghai, 2006, maybe at that point, China was very much maybe like Malaysia. In fact, even in some aspect, we would even think Malaysia is slightly ahead at that time. At that point, 2006, and also because I was shuttling between Malaysia and China between 2002 and 2006, right? At that time, people even start to fancy that, you know, Malaysia is like it's ahead, and I kind of feel that at that point of time it was like more, China still has a lot to learn and a lot of to improve, but the period that it took, right, to rise from that point where I felt that Malaysia was ahead was only a matter of few years, like in a matter of like I think before even 2010 came. Right, that I felt that, you know, China was already ahead, and at the time it was already sprinting from literally from 2005 onwards. The entire most of the major cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and also Shenzhen, they were already literally sprinting very quickly. And how do I feel it? It's also because the business that we're in, we're addressing. I had the opportunity to work at after the first startup that I worked in China in 2006. I actually took on a role with Nokia, that I saw how mobile was actually accelerating in terms of even though at that point iPhone was just stepping in, but the acceleration in terms of even smartphone adoption from 2007 to 2009 was very, very rapid, and that was where I also saw how Nokia was also losing ground to companies like Apple, who was like really accelerating. So it was a time, it was a period where I felt that short period of time, right, that I spent in China was equivalent to at least 10, 15 years in Malaysia. So the kind of pace that I felt in 3 years was like the 15 years in Malaysia. So imagine that was the acceleration that I felt being in China for 3 years versus being in Malaysia for 15 years.
I want to touch one thing that for me it's particularly important. So why, and being there, because you saw, like you said, at the time, Malaysia was quite a very advanced technology. You had the Malaysian corridor, digital corridor, and so forth. So, which was a very advanced thing in the global perspective. It was probably after Silicon Valley, one of the leading things. So how do you see this kind of stellar explosion of the innovation and technology in China? Of course, a lot of other countries like India have the numbers and they didn't achieve what China achieved. So being there, and of course not being Chinese directly, how do you see this explosion, and why do you saw, or how do you attribute the kind of innovation, the sense of work, the discipline? Just to understand, because I think when we look at these things, we tend to look at geopolitics and a lot of other things, and you forget the work behind it. Because whatever things happen because people work, and they made it happen. So I would like just to touch how, from your perspective, seeing that on the first hand, how did that happen? Just, of course, from a top level perspective.
Now, China was already accelerating. One thing that I must say is also because again in China it's largely state driven, right? And because now there's capitalism, there's money being poured into the market, investment going into the market, not just domestic but more foreign at that point of time. In those days, it was really VC money coming in, so it's a lot of foreign investment, and with state driven, and also and every city having ambition, right, to become the next Shanghai, right? You can start seeing that suddenly there's an explosion of people wanting to get into starting up. Because when I first came to China, I actually worked in a startup. Now, even in those days, in 2006, there was already a lot of startup. And the reason why there was a lot of startup at that time was because a lot of people saw someone else making money. So in those days, right, it wasn't the Tencent yet. It was company like Sina. I'm not sure whether you heard of this company. In those days, the large company would be like the Sina, Sohu, NetEase. Tencent was one of them, but not very big. And then there was Alibaba. But Alibaba in those days was a very different Alibaba, right? So these were the very successful companies. And for many years in China, right, nobody had the opportunity to even keep money, let alone, you know, make money, right? And so they saw, so a lot of these startups that I worked with and also partnered in 2006, right, saw companies that were doing well, company that went public on NASDAQ, and everyone wants to emulate to become like them. And money was just literally just pouring, and a lot of people were just accelerating. The state policy was such that they were promoting innovation. So there was promoting innovation. There was institution that provide talents into the market. There was money going. So again, this was like a recipe. It was like everything was falling into place, right, for this phenomenon to take place, right? So there was a state policy. There was institutions to supply talent. There was successful, you know, use cases, case study of successful companies. And everyone was just looking at it, you know, China with such a, you know, huge market, right? The potential is just huge, right? So, and what kind of laid beside, on top of internet was mobile was also accelerating. Now, when I look at the acceleration in internet, right? Internet in the early stage was just purely PC, right? And what really drives it all the way up, right, was the adoption of mobile. So mobile came in very nicely in 2007, 2008, right? And that drove it very quickly. And then 4G came as well, and that drives it even faster. So when you look at the evolution, right, everything was just falling into places, right? I see this as a perfect storm. What happened in China was really a perfect storm from my standpoint. Everything. Now, when I compare this to Malaysia, right? Malaysia in the early 90s, they had a big plan. I'm not sure whether you heard of a plan called the Multimedia Super Corridor. It was a plan that Malaysia wants to carve.
I visit myself. Continue. Sorry.
Right. Malaysia had literally carved. It was a very grand, you know, big idea where they were trying to carve well, it was a jungle. It was a forest, and they want to carve the jungle into a what they call it, a multimedia super corridor. What it is like, think of it as a Silicon Valley, right? You know, a big tech center, hoping that, you know, that will drive foreign investment and that they will drive talent to Malaysia and so forth, and then turn that into like a Silicon Valley of Asia. Huge plan. But I think what was lacking was, now, the government policy was there, but what was lacking was, number one, talent. Then the other problem was money, right? So without all this in place, and Malaysia being a very small population, right? And now talent becomes a problem. Where are all your talents are going to come from, right? If your talents are not going to come from Malaysia, then you need a very favorable or very flexible immigration law, right, to actually encourage people to come. I think Malaysia doesn't have that in place. So while they have a very grand plan, they've got nothing to supply into that plan. But if you look at China from that perspective, the government has all that in place. Now, not only that, I have a grand plan. The grand plan is not just Beijing, it's grand plan around all over China, right? So there are spots that they pick, right, in a way that is very strategic, and to build that spot, and at the same time supply them with lots of talent. So if you look at now talent, there's a place in West China called Chengdu. Chengdu is like flourishing now. And 10 years ago, Chengdu was like a tiny city that nobody talks about. Now it's a major city because one of the reasons why it's flourishing, right? A lot of money being poured into investment is because now Chengdu has got a lot of institution, a high-tech institution supplying a lot of these talents pool, right, to these companies in Chengdu. And Chengdu's salary is slightly lower than Shanghai, maybe roughly 30-40% lower. So a lot of people are going there. A lot of companies are actually setting up R&D in Chengdu, right? And because number one, there's ample supplies of talent. Number two, right, the infrastructure within the city is actually good because the state is supplying it as well. And the state is very flexible in terms of tax as well, right? So again, when you look at China, when the success of it is not just, it's magic, right? It's being designed in such a way, right, that there is a perfect sum and the recipe just fit in very nicely.
I appreciate that because I think it's good to demystify, and that's especially dismantle and learn how things happen. Because like you said, I think everyone wants to be a powerhouse, but what you do to get it. And that brings it to your career. So you mentioned about being the Google of mobile for China, which is a massive task. And it's interesting what you mentioned, because Nokia at the time was the king of the world, and they were leading the smartphones, and they did a massive revolution. I remember the phones of mobile, and Finland was a very tiny country that compared with even Malaysia, it's, in terms of population, it's it's 10 million people, less than 10 million. And they achieved to create one of the biggest brands in the planet, and as well innovation hubs. So how was it special in that beginning of your career to been working first with Nokia and then with Google? That became, of course, the biggest company in the planet, or one of the 3-4 biggest companies in the planet. And Nokia almost disappeared. It still is there, but it's not, of course, the player that it used to be. So I would like to touch that, because that in itself it's a powerful stuff.
Now, the thing with Nokia is this: when I joined Nokia also had a very huge, a very grand plan. Now, Nokia actually had a plan that's very similar to Apple. Really, they wanted to get into the software and service part of business from being a hardware provider by selling devices. They know that for the longer term, they need to get into software. They need to get into services, because software and services, right? You can milk money from the subscriber or even your customer for longer term, right? Because if you sell a phone, you only sell one phone in like a year or 2 years, right? But if you sell services, you can charge your customers every month or even annually. So the grand plan within Nokia was actually to build that business. But the unfortunate thing was even though they built all the pieces together, what they were lacking was they were lacking a Steve Jobs. They were lacking a person like Steve Jobs to put all that puzzle together. So I'll give you an example. Now, Nokia had a product called Apple has got a product called Apple Store, right? Nokia has a product called Nokia Downloads. I'm not sure whether you heard of it. It's a little download icon that you can actually download software to your phone, on your Nokia phone. But it's not open to any now. So developers who want to get in, right, they need to apply to Nokia, right? And Nokia will filter them. So it's not like it's as open as an app store or even a Google store where you can sign up and get your apps actually registered and also featured on those stores. So there's a lot of bottleneck in that sense. So that's one example. Now, Apple has got Apple iTunes. Nokia has got Nokia Music. So every aspect of Apple on one side, Nokia has the similar thing. Now, even Nokia has got its own map. They acquired a company called NASDAQ, right, for $7 billion, right, to serve the map service, right? So they've got all that in place already. But I think the problem was to get all these people to work together, because some of these companies, most of these companies are actually being acquired. So some of them has their co-founders still sitting as VPs of respective business unit. Versus Apple. Apple is an entire, and it's one entity, right, that looks after all the other services. So for them to put them together is a lot easier. And then you got a person like Steve Jobs, a visionary and a super, Steve Jobs, if I have to name, he's good at executing, perfect in execution. And he did it very well. Now, as for Nokia, I think what was lacking was someone to put them together. And between the departments of all these assets I was talking about, I think they were also, squabbling between them in terms of trying to work together. And because of that, right, I think that was, if you ask me from my standpoint, that was also one of the main factors why Nokia didn't go very far. And also, they were also, the other problem was, again, this is legacy, is because of the Symbian OS. That became a huge problem because it's not as simple as building a entirely new OS like the iOS. So they had a lot of legacy and there are lots of problems. And I saw even at the point of time before I left the organization, I knew it was very difficult for Nokia to move the needle at the point of time.
Good point, and I think it's interesting for people looking at us. I think probably the young people don't understand how big this is, but it's interesting to see. And as well, the challenge for startups or big companies, because you might be the biggest in the world, but you can fall very fast, which was the case. And keeping on the wave of innovation is not an easy task. So from your career, because you've been, like you said, from a legal background to working with some of the media leading companies in the world, and as well building your own personal brand, which is quite big in digital. Can you tell us a bit about some highlights of your career, and as well about your digital presence and the way you work as well, your position as a social media influencer?
Right. Now this term influencer, well, I didn't plan to become an influencer in the first place, right? In fact, a lot of people ask me, why do I do it in the first place? Now, I think you know that I'm in advertising, right? You mentioned this several times. Now, when social media came about 10 years ago, now people talk about social media being very powerful. You talk about Facebook, talk about Twitter and all that stuff. I only know them as names. I only know Facebook as name, Twitter as name. Yeah, I know what's their purpose, what's your, and how they work, but I have no clue how powerful they are, right? So I wanted to learn, and so I actually jumped onto all these various social media and started having a presence. Now, so i.e., before I teach my customers or my clients what's social media, I got to understand it first, right? I got to know how it works. I got to understand now what's the meaning of being visible. So I jumped onto it and I started, posting, right? Sharing, retweeting, liking, engaging with other influencers, and seeing, the following numbers starts to grow, right? And then I start to see, wow, the power of social media. And that was the reason why I became, very visible. And all because it started as learning, and eventually it became a habit. So I went on. Initially was learning, and then it became a habit, and I started, and I continued doing for years. So the number just kept on going up, right? The number follows, and as a result, right? I started to get people, asking, hey, how do you do it? How do you engage them? How do you create a very good post? How do you make your post viral? And eventually, that's how people start calling me, Alvin, you're an influencer. So the influencer, actually, I didn't plan to be one, but really accidental. But having been doing for years, it became a habit. So sharing is part of me already, and it's no longer just learning, but the fact that I just love to share, and whatever that I've learned that I don't share, I think I've not made good use of my knowledge. Good knowledge has to be shared, right? And the more you share, the more you get. That's my motto in sharing.
Yeah, and I love that, and I share your passion for that, because you are very inspiring in the things you do and the different parts you do. So coming back right now to your present focus in your businesses. So as I mentioned before, you're behind the DAO Ventures. I would like to start with that, because the DAO it's a quite innovative area of blockchain, but it's probably the most radical innovative. And the DAO Ventures, of course, it's a particularly interesting because you're touching, I'll read just a bit from your website, building decentralized finance, pool asset manager on blockchain, and is a smart money manager and robo-advisor on blockchain. Imagine VC in DeFi. And you aim to democratize DeFi investments through smart contracts on Ethereum blockchain and generate returns for LPs. So in the end of the day, you try to touch one of the most regulated industries in the world and putting it on blockchain and decentralized. And me as my hat, and I actually created a bank in the past and work in investment bank, I know quite a lot. Of course, I'm involved very deep in blockchain, but I would like for you to touch, first of all, what is DAO Ventures? And then second, how do you see DeFi? And third, how you see all these areas applied to asset management, which is, all of this industry are very sensitive. But as well, a bit of if from your side, explaining what is a DAO, because DAO in itself has been, there was the first DAO from Ethereum, there was a massive thing worldwide. I remember actually I was working with the guys from Ethereum and it didn't go very well, but they managed to go in the right direction. But it was one of the first explosions of the blockchain first iteration in 2016. And now we are in 2021. So a lot of stuff happened in 5 years, but I would like to hear from you.
Right. Now I'll share with you a story now, so at least you know why did DAO Ventures come about, right? Now, sometime middle of last year during COVID, prior to starting this company, I was actually the managing director of IPG Reprise China, and I was talking to my partner at that time, who is now my co-founder at DAO Ventures. Now, I've actually invested into a crypto analytics company, a startup, for about 2 years, and sometime middle of last year, the startup that we invested, right? This is not very good. We have actually seeded the company 2 rounds, and we're literally running out of money already. And so what happened? My co-founder came up to me and said, Alvin, I discovered a business, right? That is actually it's actually growing very rapidly. And he said, decentralized finance. Now, I've heard of blockchain. I've heard of a lot. I've even heard of decentralized finance. But for a person who has not worked in a finance world, decentralized finance, decentralized is already a big word, right? Now, decentralized finance is even a bigger word for me. So I started to research. Now, I actually started to read. A lot of people ask me, thought I worked in decentralized finance for a long time, probably even have finance background. I don't have a finance background. I know sufficiently finance, but not enough to advise people. Yeah. And so what happened was I started to research into decentralized finance and how we can tweak this. Now, the first thing was, now a lot of people, when you talk about DeFi right now, it's about, staking, depositing your crypto into some strategy as how to make more money on crypto. Now, the first thing I did was I actually got onto DeFi. I actually got onto a site called Yen Finance. I'm not sure what you heard of this site. Yen Finance is a DeFi site. It's a DeFi provider. And I started playing around with DeFi. And I started, when after playing around with it, that I saw how powerful this DeFi is, right? And how that would change a possibility. I agree with your one point. These are all highly regulated, very sensitive, because it's all regulated, right? But the fact that how decentralized finance can change all that, it's actually very powerful. And what I did was, now when I look at the entire infrastructure at the point of time, and even some of the website, it is way too difficult. Now, the purpose why we set up this site is we wanted to simplify DeFi investment, because before this website, before we came to this point, right, it was actually very difficult for any average Joe, right, to be investing into DeFi. Now, number one, understanding DeFi is one thing, and also trying to gauge, right, the difference in terms of risk factor, the risk attached to any of these strategies, right, is the other point. So that was how we actually got into development of DAO Ventures, right? Basically to do 2 things. One, simplifying for any average Joe, right, to get onto DeFi, that's one. And secondly, right, helping them to assess, right, the risk. So that's how DAO Ventures came about.
Just for me to understand, well, I know what is DAO and I know how it works and things like that, but can you explain how it works, the company? Because I think especially for our audience, even people in blockchain, not everyone understands the DAO, not everyone understands DeFi, not everyone understands as well how to put all of this together, but you are as well leading this to asset management. And of course you are in China. I know that the company is based in Singapore, but China is highly regulated. So a bit of how do you manage all of these different things? Because I think it's important, especially to demystify, because I think there's 2 kind of personalities, like 1% or 2 that are within this, that understand this, and 99% of people, even people that know a bit what is blockchain, don't get it. And even people that understand blockchain or a bit of trading and a bit of blockchain technology, they don't understand what is a DAO. They don't understand what is DeFi, because DeFi has been a multi-billion-dollar industry that was created just 1 year ago. so it's kind of a big thing. And of course, we have NFTs and all the things. But I would like to touch, if you could touch the DAO part and why you choose the DAO. And then the second, why you choose DeFi as well, and how you put this together, especially bear in mind that you are, of course, Singapore is one of the leading financial centers in the world, but as well, you being in China, how do you leverage these different things?
Okay. I'm probably the only person in the entire team that's actually based out of China. well, because of COVID, right? Otherwise, I would have actually moved to Singapore, which is actually closer to my team, and also less sensitive. As you know, China, China has banned cryptocurrency, and then basically you can't do anything crypto in China. So I'm here purely because my family is here. At the same time, I'm only running the marketing outfit, so nothing sensitive in terms of crypto. That's number one. Entire team is out of Singapore and also fully decentralized in the sense that none of our team, number one, we don't have an office, right? Everyone works decentralized. We have got team in India. Some of the developers are in, we have some in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and even some in China as well. So fully decentralized. We believe that that's the direction that we are taking because we feel that decentralized is now, if you look at our product development right now, it's not fully decentralized yet. We still need a lot of handholding in product development. In fact, the entire team still work on the project where 50% of the product is decentralized. But at some point, we hope that over time, right, we can actually pass on and move the platform into becoming fully decentralized. By then, right, the community will run, because we also issue a governance token that the community will have the right to decide the direction of where the platform development of the platform is going to be in the future. But right now, it's still not fully decentralized because I personally don't think it's ready for fully decentralized. But at some point, the mission and also our vision is actually to see it fully decentralized.
Sorry to go back to the DAO. I would like to, so from a DAO perspective, so how do you deal with regulatory part? And for instance, you mentioned the community. And for instance, there's at the moment two kind of, I would say, of course you can say more layers, but two major layers in crypto and DeFi and the blockchain community. There's more like organizations like Coinbase that have been working with regulators and they've been doing fantastic work to democratize blockchain and to take it mainstream. And then you have, of course, within Coinbase, you have as well the likes of, Ripple and a lot of other platforms that are really mainstream global platforms that work between finance and non-finance. And now you have the likes of Visa coming to the platform. You have Square and a lot of other organizations outside that are really making the bridge. And for instance, even yesterday or before yesterday, the price of Bitcoin just pushed again because Amazon announced that it's actually as well creating their own token, which is kind of crazy. And they are as well starting to accept Bitcoin. And even yesterday, I know that you're particularly a fan of Tesla. And Tesla, for instance, yesterday announced their returns, the quarter returns. And interesting to see it, 1/5 of the returns is coming from Bitcoin. And they still hold $1.2 billion in Bitcoin. So I wanted to touch, so from what you guys are doing, are you building the community? Are we building this kind of different things, especially considering a DAO? Because one thing is DeFi, the other thing is a DAO. A DAO is much more decentralized because the community has to create kind of, at least from the definition of DAO, it has to be self-governance between the different members of the community. And one of the things I learned is very difficult. Like you said, if you don't have strong leadership and governance, and in technology, someone can hack, someone can do a lot of things. So how you manage this at building your community?
I mean, right now, in terms of how our community is actually, we still manage our community. It's not fully, as I said earlier, right? It's really a hybrid model. Even on our community side, we still lead our community. We still have a community manager who leads them, and together collectively, right? We make decision together, but not entirely by them. We still handheld them, but they give us a lot of input. So we take a lot of input from these people, and then gradually what we want to do is that we are still our development. We have our team to develop, and at the same time, we are taking development ideas right from our community. But at some point, when the product are more ready, we're gonna move all the decision making into the DAO, and where the community then will make all the decisions. So they will decide themselves, what they want to do and where the direction is going to be taken. Now that's the DAO part. Now on regulatory, now we are also very sensitive towards this because now I'm going to go to NASDAQ, because NASDAQ is even more sensitive because it's all about tokenized stocks. As I'm sure you're aware that of late, even in the SEC has also make make a statement as well. Hong Kong Stock Exchange has also make a statement in terms of actually warning a lot of exchanges not to get into stocks, tokenized stocks. So we're actually very we are aware of all this now. But the only difference is that we think at some point there's going to be regulation. I think regulation is going to step in at some point. In fact, we think regulation is actually good because then it creates a framework, right? I don't think tokenized stocks moving forward, right, it's going to be a wild, wild west, right? But at some point, I think it's going to be regulated. But what we are doing right now is that we want to take that one step earlier to build that on DeFi. And at some point, when the regulation comes in, right, we will be able to evolve with regulations. So that's where I'll stand as far as regulation is concerned. We don't think this is going to be a wild, wild west ever. But at some point, once regulation comes in, right, we will need to fit in and figure out how to see, depending on which jurisdiction, right, then we will then apply accordingly, right, to work with the jurisdiction, right, in terms of actually fulfilling those requirements.
So that let me ask you then, can you tell us about NASDAQ? So NASDAQ is precisely what you mentioned, a company, and as well looking from the notes I have here. So it's a tokenized stock trading exchange. Imagine NASDAQ on blockchain, and is designed to serve as a bridge between the crypto world and the equity world. We believe that the on-chain adoption of the equity asset class will deliver increased accessibility and improvement. So I know that at the moment, and actually it's one area that I'm particularly interested in, is that digital twins are becoming a key element for cities. Most of the governments are right now looking in digitizing property to make sure, and it makes complete sense. It's just replacing paper and making it is much more scalable. So tell us a bit about what is NASDAQ and what you are trying to do on this, because it's quite an interesting, and I think it's going to be the biggest thing in the world, because the economy will all be tokenized, so digitized, whatever term we want to use.
We basically want to be able to allow anybody, right, to tokenize any assets, right, that real world assets. So it could be stocks, it could be commodities, it could be FX, it could be any, so as long as any asset that's actually listed out there that's tradable, right? We want to allow any individuals to be able to tokenize them and then offer them, right, on our platform. So basically what happens is, say, Dinis, if you like to short, let's say Tesla, let's talk about Tesla. And if you think Tesla price is going to come down, right, you can short it. And basically what you do is that you can actually, go to our platform. You can actually mint a Tesla token, right? You mint a Tesla token, and after minting that Tesla token, right, and then once that token is tokenized, you can actually find a trader can actually trade against you on your platform. So you create a token, and then a trader can trade against you. So you can short it, right, and someone else can go along with it. So this thing can apply to all kinds of any asset that's actually tradable, and we want to allow any individuals to. Now the only difference is that now this is unlike stocks. You don't buy into a stock. Now you don't have the rights as a stockholder, as a shareholder. But what you end up having, right, is that you have a tokenized version of it, and we are taking, right, the economics, right, to an oracle, to a price oracle. We're going to pick up all the economic, i.e. the performance of the stock price, right, and then that's going to sit on your tokens. So your token price will fluctuate according to the real price, and someone else can trade against you. So that's what we're trying to build. So and you can actually tokenize any kind of asset, and that's our mission in simple terms.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see because if you look, I was looking at all these areas right now. Is the DeFi industry is really becoming massive, and I think a lot of global platforms, well, just mentioned Amazon, are all right now using elements of decentralized with elements of centralized. So one question on that: how do you see now, more as a helicopter view? And I'm sure that your companies are going to be quite successful because this is a big thing and is necessary. But how do you see the kind of the bridge between the centralized financial and the actually economic systems and the non-decentralized, because of course the two things are already moving together. And for instance, as you saw in the last months with Bitcoin reaching over $1 trillion valuation, if you look at the world economy in terms of GDP, it's around $80 trillion. Of course, there's a lot of assets. For instance, if you look at property, it's much bigger. And if you look at actually trading assets, it's even, there's $800 trillion of trading assets. And most of these trading assets are just out of nothing. So it's just created by financial organizations. So, but my point is, how do you see these two dynamics? Because of course, this brings us a bit, if you look from a science fiction of narratives, is that we're going to have like communities that can actually disrupt the entire world economy without the rest of the world economy having even a knowledge about that. And for instance, Elon Musk has been very smart on that because he's been playing around with Dogecoin, even with the price of Bitcoin, and he can do it. He can crash the entire price of Bitcoin in one day, and the other day he can take it again. So of course, if you know how to trade, you can make billions of dollars on this, okay? And ultimately, the regulators are not getting anything, which is the part for me that gets me very, very nervous, because of course, we still want the economy, the world to be better. So I think, how do you see these kind of things? Because this is happening as we speak. It's not science fiction, and we just need to see the news. And of course, people like us are within the wave, but from people outside, even people that for instance, I remember that I was talking with, in a conference with I think it was like the vice president of one of the biggest financial organizations in the planet. I'm not going to mention names. And that person had no clue about blockchain or crypto. And this was like 3 years ago. And I remember, but your organization is doing all of this. Do you know that? And this person was on the top management. My point is that this kind of things, even within organizations that are doing this, and for instance, another one was the deputy CEO of one of the biggest banks in the planet that I was as well having a conference with. And he was asking me, can you teach me about blockchain? I was looking at him, but your bank is, he has an entire division on that. So you know what I mean? So but of course, if you go to open a bank account and you say you work in crypto, they will block you. So there's a lot of schizophrenic things on this level. So, but this is happening. So I want to touch this, especially as someone that is an entrepreneur, but as well thought leader and an influencer. So you're touching the three levels very few people do.
My take would be, it has to merge. Why do I say that? Now, if you look at the size of any of this, you talk about crypto, you talk about even DeFi for that matter. These are, and crypto is probably $2 trillion, right? DeFi even smaller, maybe less than $100 billion, or probably less. And if you compare that to derivative, you compare to stocks, you compare, I mean, those are huge. I mean, the universe of finance, right, is a lot bigger than what it is. And for this to grow into that, right, I see them, merging. I see more in terms of actually the big guys merging with the small, because when you look at technology evolution, right, it's always the small guys that eventually become very big, right? It's always the case, because it's a technology that always supersedes and overtakes traditional, and I see that happening, right? And what we are seeing right now is that we are seeing some of the more forward-looking organizations getting in that space, right? You talk about Visa. You talk about Square, and then more and more companies getting in space and understanding the power of blockchain, the power of DeFi. And I see them taking it, right, and then growing that business. And only through them, right, that the business can be very big. And again, the regulation has also come in as well, because regulation will provide the framework, right, for the business, right, to actually grow much faster. Because without regulation, I don't see how we can, still live in this wild, wild west and expect it, right, to take charge of the entire finance business.
No, you're completely right. And I think this is kind of the biggest challenge we have in the world economy, is that I think how can we ride these waves and create value for people? But as well, my point as a social conscious person, or I try to be, is how to make sure that we don't create other dystopian organizations. Because my main challenge is that in society, things go very fast, both nature and people, but with technology, the acceleration is exponential. And I think you touch AI, and AI is going to be disrupting this tenfolder, or not tenfolder, 1,000-folder. So this will be, especially in the next couple of years, a lot of big things happening that will be disrupting, but especially the financial side is, at the moment, there's a lot of digital divide, point one, and financial divide. So if you can actually empower people, because in the end of the day, most of the world population, let's say from the 8 billion people, around 8 billion people of the planet, most of people are living for like less than $500 or even $300 per month. So this is around, that means with, I don't know, $1,000 to $5,000 per year, we can actually solve all the problems in the planet. So multiplying this by the world economy is not a lot of money, ironically. There's enough money circulating just to feed these people. So it's like creating a global, some kind of gamification system to empower these people that can solve the problems. But well, that's a bigger discussion. So I want to come back to the way you've been looking at trends and the future. And I think we talk about your company. So you are an advisor of one of the biggest events that is the, I always spell it wrong, but I'll try to
it's
spell it.
actually called South by Southwest.
South by Southwest, I know. But it's just SX, but the South by Southwest. So how do you, being a member of Board of Advisors is one of the biggest trend makers, because South by Southwest is one of the biggest festivals and organizations, but they've been as well on the cutting edge of innovation, digital, and a lot of events. So can you tell us about that? Being in the board is quite interesting, and as well being you between China and Asia, how do you make all these bridges?
My role at South by Southwest is actually to do a couple of things. Number one is to expand South by Southwest in China in terms of getting to locate to basically recommend two types of people. One, thought leaders and also senior, very innovative people, right, to join the executive board. That's one, right? So that's number one. Number two is identify startups, very innovative, very creative startup, right, to join South by Southwest. It's an annual festival. They need a lot of these participants to go there, right, to present themselves for the festival. And there are a lot of categories in the festival. They split it into technology, into films, into what have you. So our job is basically to do two things. One is to find more people like us to help them to source for more innovative companies. And at the same time, we also do judging at the end, because once you have got all these companies that come from all around the world, then depending on our area of expertise, right, we then judge them and also help them to find who are the best startups, who may be the best film producer and what have you. So these are our involvement as far as my involvement with South by Southwest is concerned.
Fantastic. So I have two last questions. I know that I'm passing the 1 hour benchmark, so I will try to be responsible towards your time and appreciate. I have
no problem.
You might do the second one. So one of the questions is, so we've been among COVID-19, and you talk about digital transformation. So COVID-19 has been, of course, a big challenge for the world population and for the world economy, but it's not stopping. Actually, Malaysia is going through a lot of challenge in COVID. All Asia, even the Olympic Games is the first time probably in history that we have the Olympic Games without an audience. But still the economy is moving, and in one end has been the fast growing element of digital transformation for the economic and the society in history. So I would like to see, how do you see COVID-19 as a way to redesign our society? And how you see all these technologies being used for good, and as well to empower us, because that's part of your work. And I think you've been always very conscious about this, both inspiration, but as well with practicalities. But I would like to see, how do you see this, and some notes around this?
A lot of things that what we are doing at DAO Ventures is already is business as usual already. If you look at most of our companies, now before I even left IPG, we were at, that's probably like second quarter of last year. In fact, after the first COVID that hit China, immediately a lot of us has already started working from home already, and the only good thing about the fact was now being a tech, being an advertising and a tech companies, right? It's a lot easier for us because a lot of us are already working from home at times and working from anywhere, and also the technology that we were using at that time, collaborative software and also video conferencing, was already something that we were quite used to. So for us, it was a lot easier. But in China at that point of time, right, there were a lot of companies, especially local companies, They were still very traditional in their way of doing business. They were still meeting people and what have you. Now, COVID has actually driven them in a sense that everything right now is now somehow COVID have driven digital transformation. Something that they're supposed to take 5 to 10 years, right? That has shortened down to about 6 months. I think within 6 months, right? Every company's in China right now. Everyone, including the traditional companies that were not very used to using technology, right? Now everyone is actually using Zoom, or there's a local version in China, and collaborative software. So the business forward for even many corporations in China right now is very tech centric and at the same time very collaborative.
Yeah, and that the last question, but I still probably will open to you. So in terms of this point where we are, and I know that you are, well, of course, very deep in blockchain, DeFi, and even decentralized autonomous organizations, but you are as well into hardcore technology. You are a digital transformation expert and leader. But how do you see the immediate future and present that we are going through, especially bearing in mind that you are in China, where, for instance, especially in China, for instance, right now, people don't use any kind of paper money. It's all digital. And you've been as well seeing, and for instance, even Singapore, where you have your business or some of your businesses as much advanced. And actually, Singapore as well, 20 years ago was nothing. Now is one of the top countries in the planet. So that's well a small, tiny country that is, or even we're talking about the small city country that became one of the powerhouses of innovation in the planet. So I would like to see, how do you see this immediately present future and some of the areas? I don't know if you want to talk a bit about AI or other areas. We talk about blockchain, so probably other areas that you see as well important for the present future.
I mean, if I were to answer that question in a very simple term right now, if you see China as one of the most forward in terms of technology development, from smart city to infrastructure to even we talk about money, right? E-commerce and so forth. Now, if this was the advance, this is the future, right? Then I would assume Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, and countries around the region, in time to come, right? You would see a lot of this technology being exported into those countries. Obviously, it would be a different stage because most of these countries are also progressing at different stage. But I would assume that in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, you would see a version of China in the next 5-10 years. Now, like in Singapore right now, we are really seeing more and more. I'm not saying that it's at China level yet, but you can definitely see in Singapore more, digital money, payment over wallet is actually very, very common now. Even in Malaysia as well, similar to WeChat payment and Alipay is actually very common in Malaysia. And I think that will spread to Thailand and also Vietnam as well. So if you were to point China being most forward-looking, right, having infrastructure laid down in so many aspects, I think you would similarly see, right, the same technology being exported to Asia and maybe at some point to Africa, because I think the future is already in China, right? It's just how do you take them to the different parts of the world. That's how I see in terms of the progress around Asia. Now, as far as China is concerned, the government has laid down very clear policy in terms of how they are growing each of the cities. In fact, they are also carving new areas because as the city becomes bigger, they are actually growing the cities. And some of the district, right, there was actually not part of cities, right, has been even being acquired and also being now made part of the cities. And some of these new cities, right, are being turned into smart city immediately because they are actually leapfrogging, right, from development of what it was, right, to a smart city almost instantly, and powering. I've seen some of the road system, right, that's being designed, right, for autonomous cars already. This city is like 70 kilometers from Beijing. It's called Xiaoan. It's the entire city, right? The road system, everything else, right, is being made and designed for smart city with infrastructure on high-speed bullet train, and at the same time roads, right, autonomous car. And that's what we're seeing in China already. And obviously infrastructure, maybe now still 5G, by then I think it's going to be 6G already. So that's how far we get. And everything that's going to be powered, again, the back end is going to be powered by AI, robotic. And I mean, the future of China, it's unimaginable, but I can see, I can imagine, in the next 5-10 years, it's going to be a very different city. It's going to be a different Beijing, it's going to be a different Shanghai. And obviously in Asia, you will see more and more countries adopting the similar technologies that are being used in China. China is really exporting a lot of their infrastructure and also technology across Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is probably one of the biggest adopter of Chinese technology.
There's the fast growing population and the fast growing economic zone in the planet. So I want to still, although it was my last question, I want to touch the smart cities and the infrastructure. Because for instance, in Europe, at the velocity, which is really impressive, because in Europe, of course, we have a lot of legacy systems, which you touched. That's partly what took down Nokia. And as well, people are not very receptive to innovation. For instance, I'm in London. London is an exception because it has this kind of vibrant population from all over the world. So people tend to be much more open. But I know that China can create an hospital in one night, can push things really at a velocity that is crazy. And as well, like you said, Southeast Asia, Israel, and they have a lot of experience, like you mentioned, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, which according to most of the World Economic Forum and the World Bank provisions in 2050, for instance, Indonesia is going to be the 5th economy in the world. And the US is going to be the 3rd economy in the world, according to most of the predictions. So we're going to have yes, completely. So we're going to have a lot of differences in terms of geopolitics. So I would like to touch that, especially in the light of smart cities and AI. Because this is going so fast, and AI is going to create a new layer of disruption. Because of course, for instance, Japan is already dealing with robotics at a very high level. You mentioned, for instance, that the cities in China are already preparing for autonomous vehicles. And of course, as well, like you said, most of these countries like Southeast Asia and Africa, they don't have legacy systems. So that means, and they have most of the population is very young. It's like 20 something. So this is both even Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, most of Africa is around, the average age is around 20 somethings. So I want to hear how do you see this, especially as well, someone that has been there, and as well, you've been between, of course, 3 countries that are quite epicenter of the dynamics. So Malaysia has been an epicenter of dynamics because, of course, Singapore came out of Malaysia, and Singapore has become what it is today out of nothing, let's put it that way. And there's no resources. It was just about in terms of innovation, in terms of young population, in terms of the acceleration of technology, and especially when it comes to artificial intelligence and smart cities, because definitely China is ahead, I would say 10 years of the rest of the world in terms of infrastructure of AI and technology, even in blockchain. Even if it's centralized technology, even if it used to be decentralized, but it's centralized, but it definitely from a technology standpoint is there. So how do you see this in the context of the young population, and as well this kind of, I would say, explosion of, you mentioned that definitely a couple of countries in Asia is going to be exploding to become global powerhouses. I don't have doubts because they work much more, because I see as well, for instance, my team in Asia works much more than the team in Europe. There's no doubt. And as well, people are much more ambitious. They want to get things done. Whereas in Europe, people want to have a lifestyle. They don't want to do too much. And that as well is going to have a lot of consequences because, of course, if you don't work, and as well in Europe, we are much older in average. So I will just look at this purely from a geopolitical, but as well technological standpoint.
Around Asia, I mean, China is also facing with a aging population. I'm sure you probably have been following news about China's drive into trying to solve the aging population issue. It's not easy because aging population is you can't solve this in a short period of time. It takes generations to solve. They're trying to solve this, and there are a lot of challenges ahead. I mean, education is one. The cost of raising a family is the other one as well. So they're trying to do something about it, and some of the decision. But I don't expect things to be solved within the short period of time. But definitely within the next at least 10 15 20 years, we will see things gradually improving.
Thank you. I think it's a very big thing, and definitely one of the things that just for people listening to us, definitely by 2050, the prediction is that from 1.1 billion people, China will have 700 million. So it's kind of it's considerably less people. We're talking about the diminutions of almost 40% of the population. So definitely will have consequences because, of course, this older side of the population. Of course, for instance, if you look ahead, we start this conversation talking about Nokia. Nokia is one of the oldest populations in the world, but they actually managed to train them to become very digital. So they have a very good life balance, but as well, people work until late, and they kept that innovative part of society. But well,
which is why China is also trying understands the problem aging population, and that's why automation is very, very key, and trying to promote automation, robotic technology, smart manufacturing. So in the future, right, there'll be more machine doing the work, right, and there'll be more machine driving taxis and whatever right, leaving people to do things that are more important, more creative, and whatever and more innovative, right, and more that requires critical thinking. That's a challenge of China, but at the same time, they also need to also solve, right, moving forward, right, solving aging, the population with aging problem. Now, Asia, on the other hand, is a lot more fortunate because if you look at most countries in Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, very young population. We're talking about the youth being in the mid-20s at most, and they are also very equipped with technology. They're also very savvy, and at the same time, they live in an era where they are a lot more positive. I think when you look at in terms of where Asia is, right, Asia will definitely grow very quickly. Asia has got well, the culture may be different, languages may be different, but because of the fact, right, they live in an era where they're actually well equipped from technology standpoint, and also the fact that the proximity of all these countries working together. I think ASEAN as a one unit and as a region, they will do very well in the nearest future for sure. And obviously Singapore being that one nation. Now, in terms of when you talk about development of smart cities, right, the one nation that will develop the fastest will probably be Singapore. Number one, well, they've got the resource. Number two, now they're not that big, to convert the entire Singapore into a smart cities. I mean, they're already near smart city status, right? But to convert them into a real true smart cities, right, it won't take a lot of effort if you compare it to Malaysia, Thailand, or even Indonesia. So Singapore has got a lot of opportunity in terms of people going, and also influx of talent, influx of investment, and at the same time very strategic.
I'm completely with you, and I think we're going to see, I would say the 21st century is going to be an Asian century because you guys are going to lead definitely both from an innovation, technology, and even from an economical standpoint. It's already happening, but it's going to be much bigger. So I think we're going to have a new geopolitical driving system. So Alvin, I think there's a lot of more questions, but I want to thank you for your time. It's been fantastic and great insights, and it passed very fast. So I want to thank you, and we'll put the links to your ventures, to your social media profiles. I urge everyone listening to us to follow you on Twitter, to follow you on different channels. If you are in China, go to your WeChat because you have always great content with sense of humor and great innovation. And of course, I'm looking forward to see how it goes with the DAO Ventures and with the NASDAQs. I love the projects. I wish you a lot of success, and I hope that you can contribute whatever necessary for that. And hopefully we're going to be able to do a second session, probably in a live, with a lot of people discussing some of these topics. Thank you so much, Alvin, for your time and for your inspiration.
Thanks, Dinis. Thanks again for the invite. It's been amazing. I hope to talk to you again. Hopefully, doesn't have to be a session like this. Maybe another session that we can have a one-on-one. Love to hear more from you. Love to learn from you. And definitely, I enjoy the conversation very much. Thanks a lot.
All my pleasure. I think you're a fantastic force of nature. Thank you.